Imagine two people earning almost exactly the same salary. They wake up at the same time, drive to work, pay the same kinds of bills. 5 years later, one still checks their bank account before buying groceries. The other sleeps peacefully, even when life throws unexpected expenses their way. What happened? It wasn't a lottery ticket. It wasn't a promotion. It was one decision they started making every single payday. Imagine two neighbors living on the same street. They earn almost the same income. Their kids go to similar schools. They shop at the same grocery store. From the outside, their lives look almost identical. Fast forward 5 years. One family still feels like they're one emergency away from financial panic. The other isn't rich, but they're noticeably calmer, less stressed, more confident about tomorrow. Here's the interesting part. Their salaries weren't dramatically different. One simply learned something the other never did. Most people think income creates wealth. It doesn't. Income creates opportunity. What you do after that determines almost everything. And once you understand the difference, you'll start seeing money in a completely different way. Income versus wealth, the difference that quietly changes your entire future. Let's meet two fictional people. We'll call them Ryan and Daniel. They're not based on anyone specific, but their story plays out in millions of households every year. Every other Friday, both get paid. Bills get covered, groceries are bought. Life moves forward. Nothing unusual. Month after month, everything feels normal, which is exactly why the next part is so easy to miss. Ryan believes life gets easier once he earns more money. Every raise feels like permission to spend a little more comfortably. Daniel asks himself a different question. Where is every dollar actually going? That sounds like a small question, but small questions often produce life-changing answers. Think of your finances like a water tank. Income pours water into the top. Expenses create holes at the bottom. Now imagine working harder every year to pump in more water without fixing the leaks underneath. That's exactly what happens to millions of people. Higher income, same financial stress, because wealth isn't built by what flows through your hands, it's built by what stays long enough to grow. Daniel isn't judging himself, he's observing himself. That's an important difference. He notices housing costs, necessary expenses, convenient spending, subscription services he barely uses, weekend purchases he doesn't even remember making. None of these purchases are outrageous by themselves. That's what makes this so dangerous. Financial stress rarely comes from one huge mistake. It usually arrives disguised as dozens of small habits. Here's the thing. Money doesn't disappear dramatically. It disappears quietly. $5 here, $20 there, another monthly subscription, another impulse purchase because it felt earned after a long week. The goal isn't to eliminate every pleasure. The goal is making sure your money reflects your priorities instead of your impulses. Then, life does what life always does. Something unexpected happens. Maybe the car needs repairs. Maybe the air conditioner quits in the middle of summer. Maybe someone ends up in the emergency room. Ryan has no choice but to borrow. Daniel has another option, because months earlier, while nothing exciting was happening, he quietly built something most people overlook, a financial cushion. Think of an emergency fund like wearing a helmet. It doesn't make the ride faster. It doesn't win races. It simply protects you when life suddenly changes direction. And in personal finance, survival often comes before growth. But even people who save regularly can run into another invisible problem, one that almost never makes headlines because it happens so gradually: inflation. Imagine walking into the grocery store with $100 today, then walking into that same store 5 years from now with the exact same $100. The number printed on the bill hasn't changed, but what it can actually buy probably has. That's the quiet thief almost every saver eventually meets. Money that never grows slowly loses purchasing power over time. Not overnight, not dramatically, just little by little. Which leads us to one of the most misunderstood ideas in finance, and this single concept has created more ordinary millionaires than flashy investment strategies ever have. Wealth doesn't explode overnight. It grows the way a tree grows, quietly, patiently, almost invisibly at first. Think about planting an oak tree. You don't expect shade next week. You don't dig it up every few days to check whether the roots are growing. You water it, you protect it, then you let time do what only time can do. Investing works much the same way. At first, the progress feels almost disappointing. The numbers barely move. That's the stage where most people quit. But eventually something interesting begins to happen. Your money starts earning money. Then the growth itself begins creating even more growth. That's the quiet power of compounding. Not because it creates miracles, but because it rewards consistency longer than most people are willing to stay patient. The biggest advantage isn't earning the highest return, it's staying invested long enough for time to become your business partner. But this is also where many people accidentally sabotage themselves even after doing everything else right. They hear that investing is important, so they rush into whatever happens to be popular that month. Every few years, there's a new can't-miss opportunity. People convince themselves this time is different. Here's the thing. A good investment isn't just about potential returns. It's about whether it fits your life. When do you need the money? How much risk can you actually tolerate? What happens if the market falls tomorrow? Those questions matter far more than chasing whatever everyone else is talking about. You've probably heard the phrase, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket." It's repeated so often that people stop thinking about it, but it's one of the simplest forms of financial protection. Diversification won't always produce the highest return in any single year, but it can help prevent one bad decision from destroying years of disciplined progress. Now, let's go back to Ryan. A year later, he gets promoted. His income increases by 15%. Great news! Within months, the extra money has quietly disappeared into a nicer apartment, newer gadgets, more expensive restaurants, and subscriptions that now feel completely normal. Financial experts call this lifestyle inflation. Most people never notice it's happening because every upgrade feels reasonable on its own. That's why earning more money doesn't automatically create more freedom. Sometimes it simply creates more expensive habits. Daniel gets the exact same raise, but before changing his lifestyle, he changes his system. Part of the raise automatically increases his investments. Another portion strengthens his emergency fund. Some goes towards learning new skills that can increase future income even more. He removes emotion from the process. His money receives instructions before he has a chance to spend it. 5 years pass. Ryan still works incredibly hard. In fact, he's probably working harder than ever. But financially, almost everything depends on the next paycheck arriving on time. One surprise expense immediately creates stress. One missed paycheck creates panic. Daniel isn't retired. He doesn't own a private jet. He's not posting motivational quotes from a beach in the Maldives. But he has something that's often far more valuable than looking wealthy. He has breathing room, margin, time to think before making decisions, cash available for unexpected problems, investments quietly working in the background. That's one of the earliest signs of real wealth. Not luxury, not status, peace of mind. Wealth often looks surprisingly ordinary. It's sleeping well because one emergency won't destroy your finances. It's making decisions based on long-term goals instead of short-term panic. It's having enough flexibility to say no when something isn't right because you're no longer financially cornered. That's why wealth isn't measured only by what's in your investment account. It's measured by the amount of control you have over your own life. And here's what surprises most people. Almost nobody builds lasting wealth through one giant decision. They build it through hundreds of ordinary decisions that barely seem important at the time. Looking where money goes, saving before spending, investing consistently, avoiding unnecessary debt, improving skills, being patient when everyone else is chasing shortcuts. None of those habits are exciting on a Tuesday afternoon, but repeated for 10, 20, 30 years, they become almost impossible to ignore. Ryan spent years trying to earn more money. Daniel spent years building a financial system. Eventually, the system became more powerful than the salary itself, because income helps you survive today. Wealth helps protect tomorrow. Income pays your bills. Wealth gives you choices. Income supports your lifestyle. Wealth supports your future. So if you're wondering where to begin, don't try to change everything this week. Start with 4 small moves. First, track every dollar for the next 30 days. Not to judge yourself, simply to understand your habits. Second, begin building an emergency fund, even if it's only a small amount each paycheck. Third, automate your investing, so consistency doesn't depend on motivation. And finally, keep investing in the asset with the highest long-term potential, your own knowledge and skills.